What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 1 top 20 tight end rankings. This is going to be my last set of Week 1 rankings. I've already gone through the running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks. Now we're focusing in on the tight ends. If you guys have any fantasy questions, you can drop them down below. I'll make sure to respond to every single person. And if you do enjoy the video, helps you out, or you ask a question, just do me a huge favor and hit that like button. But let's dive right into the rankings. And we are going to start off in tier 1. And I feel like this is a very unique year at the tight end position where there doesn't seem to be one consensus top guy. There's not one tight end that's locked into round 1, locked into round 2. There are a lot of different players who, seem like they have the upside to finish as the number 1 overall tight end. So I do have 5 guys here in the first tier. It's going to be Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, Travis Kelce, Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews. I wouldn't get overly caught up in the order of how these guys are ranked, assuming you're in a normal size league, not playing in like a 4-team league. If you drafted one of these guys, it's very unlikely that you are going to have a second one. So you're going to be playing them regardless. But I do have Sam Laporta as the number 1 option. He is my tight end 1 heading into this year, and the Lions have the highest implied points here in week 1. So if they're putting up points, Sam Laporta is obviously going to be a touchdown threat. That's why he's my tight end 1. I have Trey McBride here as my number 2 this week. The Cardinals are 5.5-point dogs to the Bills. Probably going to be a pass-heavy game script. Also, the Bills are going to be without Matt Milano, which I think is definitely going to open things up here for Trey McBride. We have Travis Kelce, who, still a tier 1 option, a top option here this week, but just not the best matchup going up against the Ravens. Then you have Dalton Kincaid, who I didn't really have in my tier 1 heading into the season in terms of my season-long rankings. But I think this is a decent matchup here for him going up against the Cardinals. The Bills have the second highest implied points. And then the final tight end here, Mark Andrews, going up against the Chiefs. Not the best matchup, but obviously still someone that I'm comfortable playing. Now looking at tier 2, I actually only have one tier 2 tight end, and it is Kyle Pitts. And I will say, right as I'm recording this, we're getting the news that he has now been dealing with a hamstring injury. He is limited at practice. At this point, from what I've seen, I'm not overly concerned. Obviously, it's not a great sign, right? For Kyle Pitts, it's always something, right? The first couple of years, he was showing flashes, but the situation was bad. It was Arthur Smith. It was poor quarterback play. Last year, it was all those things. And then also he had some injury issues, I think both during the season and then also heading into the year. So now everything seemed like it was trending in the right direction. You have Kirk Cousins, Arthur Smith is gone, and now he's potentially injured heading into week 1. But like I said, from what I've seen, I'm not overly concerned. I'm assuming they're just being cautious. There's no reason for him to be, logging super intense practices if they think, he's just going to be ready for week 1 here. So I still like Kyle Pitts in tier 2. I still have him separated from the guys below him, but definitely something to monitor. And obviously if we get, more negative news, then I would consider moving him down. Looking at tier 3, I only have 2 guys here. It's Evan Ingram and it's George Kittle. I think Ingram has the much better matchup here going up against the Dolphins compared to George Kittle going up against the Jets. Ingram at number 7, George Kittle number 8, both in somewhat crowded, weapon rooms. I think George Kittle obviously has the better competition with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, CMC. For Evan Ingram, I think some people are kind of confused why he's maybe going lower than where he finished last year. And the one thing I will point out is just that in the games where Christian Kirk was playing and was in the slot, running a lot of routes, that's where Evan Ingram wasn't performing as well. So Christian Kirk healthy into the season. When Evan Ingram was balling out towards the end of last year, it was without Christian Kirk in the lineup. So just something to kind of keep in mind there. Then shifting into tier 4, I've got 3 tight ends here. These tight ends were all in the same tier heading into the season for me. Feel the same way about them here in week 1. It's David Njoku, it's Jake Ferguson, and it is Brock Bowers. Njoku and Ferguson facing off here. We have Cowboys taking on the Browns. Both these teams, are very good defenses. It's rough matchups for both. Both these teams are in the bottom half of implied points this week, so probably not a super high-scoring game. So I think they're solid as back-end tight end 1 plays. And then for Brock Bowers, he definitely has the much better matchup, but I'm wondering, how involved he's going to be early on in the season. I do think the usage we saw in the preseason was fun. He was lining up in the backfield. He was in line. He was in the slot. He was out wide. Hopefully that just translates right into week 1, but maybe they slowly ease him into the offense. We'll just have to wait and see. But if you drafted him, I still think he's a solid play here in week 1. And then looking at tier 5, 2 guys in this tier, we have Dallas Goedert, Taysom Hill. Dallas Goedert just kind of seems like the higher floor, like low ceiling option you pick if you whiff on one of the first 11. You kind of punt the tight end position. He's fine. He's not going to be the highest ceiling guy, but he'll be a decent like fringe tight end one for you. And then Taysom Hill. He's someone that I think is being a little bit slept on if he does have a tight end designation within your league. He's not going to be giving you the prototypical tight end production. He might be running some routes 50, 60% opportunity share, but I think most of his production fantasy-wise is going to come from his usage as a running back. I think there's a legit chance he's just the Saints like straight up goal line running back. You have Kendre Miller, out for the first 4+ games. You have Jamal Williams, who hasn't made a ton of noise with the Saints. I don't think the Saints want to use Alvin Kamara near the goal line. So I think that could go to Taysom Hill. He's going to be used creatively. And once we're getting like at this point in the tight end position, there's not a ton of sure things. So I think Taysom Hill is fine here in tier 5. And then tier 6 is pretty large. Honestly, within this tier, week 1 is going to be very, very telling. The route participation that these guys have is going to be big. We want to see which of these tight ends are full-time guys, which guys are in tight end by committee, which players actually have upside to be top 2 target earners within their offense. So just running through the names here: Dalton Schultz, Colby Parkinson, Pat Freiermuth, Noah Fant, Hunter Henry, Luke Musgrave, Cole Kmet. Also honorable mention to Tyler Conklin, who could have been on here. So looking at Dalton Schultz, I think he's kind of the unique example within this grouping where he's an established guy. He's been a decent fantasy option. His problem is just that he's at best the number 4 target for the Texans behind their big 3 wide receivers with Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell. So even though I think his routes are going to be solid, his route participation is going to be high, he does seem fairly touchdown dependent because I don't think we can bank on consistent volume out of a guy who's competing for targets with all those other weapons. Once, we're past Schultz, that's really where we're looking at these guys where the usage is kind of up in the air. Colby Parkinson, I think, is kind of a sleeper this year, especially with Tyler Higbee out for the Rams. We've seen Tyler Higbee be pretty fantasy relevant. His route participations were high. They like to use, one top tight end. And I think Colby Parkinson definitely could be that guy early on in the season with Tyler Higbee out. After Parkinson, we have Pat Freiermuth. And Freiermuth was someone that I was really in on earlier on in the offseason. But the more we saw the usage from the Steelers starters in preseason, the more I kind of eased off because the upside for Freiermuth was that behind George Pickens, they don't really have much going on at the wide receiver position. Freiermuth had a solid year 1 in the NFL, a solid year 2. Last year was rough, but, was kind of willing to forget that. If he could lock down like the full-time starting workload, have a solid route participation. That's not really what we saw in the preseason. It was a pretty decent split with Darnell Washington. So being a 60 to 70% route participation guy on a bad offense, that's not something I'm super excited about. Hopefully we see better usage in week 1. We'll just have to wait and see. Noah Fant, also pretty interesting. Before he was traded to the Seahawks, he was like a solid tight end option, like a back-end tight end 1 in points per game in back-to-back seasons. We just need to see what the usage is like with the new coaching staff here. But someone who I think is plenty talented and with the right usage could definitely be like a fringe tight end 1 play. Hunter Henry, I think another guy who could be a potential top 2 target on this Patriots offense. The wide receiver room is either, very unproven or like these veterans who just aren't all that great, not top target earners. So I think Hunter Henry, definitely an interesting option. Just in week 1 with Brissett at quarterback, I think they have by far the fewest implied points this week. So the offense is poor. We'll just kind of see what his usage is. Then Luke Musgrave, someone in this Packers room where we're just not quite sure how they're going to use these weapons. It seems like their top 4 wide receivers are almost like going to be in a split, a committee. We'll see if they do the same thing at the tight end position with Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. I would say Musgrave's the favorite to lead in routes, but is it actually going to be enough for him to be relevant week to week? And then the final guy here in the top 20, Cole Kmet. I am very, very out on Cole Kmet. This might seem low. This is something I've talked about in like my tight end videos, I guess some draft strategy videos. Cole Kmet, like Dalton Schultz, is at best the number 4 target behind their big 3 wide receivers with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. The problem with Cole Kmet is that he is not even a full-time player, at least from what we saw in the preseason. At least Dalton Schultz is like the clear-cut tight end 1. Cole Kmet was in a very solid split with Gerald Everett in the preseason. Shane Waldron coming over from the Seahawks. He loves to use a tight end by committee. So I'm pretty out on Cole Kmet. The only reason I have him in the top 20 here is because I do think the Bears are going to put up points. So if you were trying to bank on like a touchdown game, this could be the one for Cole Kmet, while you also have some uncertainty with these other tight ends. Tyler Conklin, who I just left off the list, just has a tough matchup, so not the best look. And then I'll also give just some honorable mentions. I think Greg Dulcich is really interesting. If we're talking about upside at the tight end position, he probably is, better than at least a third of this list in terms of his like peak ceiling. Could be the locked in tight end one for the Broncos. I just don't know how solid the usage is going to be in week one. And then Ben Sinnott, who right now is the tight end 3 for the Commanders, not someone who I'm interested in playing in week one, but someone who definitely could break out later on in the season. So that's going to wrap it up for my top 20, plus a few other options in there. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions, drop them down below. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.